Welcome into the RotoWire NFL podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie, joined as always by Mario Puig. It is Thursday, April 15th, tax day. We all know it. We all love it. And we are going to get into a handful of things. We got a bit of a grab bag of a show for today. We're going to unpack a couple of teams that are piquing our respective interests. We're going to get into the Broncos and the Carolina Panthers, really deep dives into both of them and how you should be approaching their respective players in your best ball drafts and, of course, in your regular season-long drafts once those start cropping up. And we're also going to run through in the second half of the show. We're going to get into a rookie draft, just kind of set the record straight on a two-round rookie draft, just like you would in your dynasty leagues. I'm sure that those rookie drafts are coming up in your respective leagues here anytime soon, so we will get into those as well. But Mario, I want to kick things off in Denver because I was thinking about them the other day. And just what a weird kind of limbo that they're in where, like, at once I'm so intrigued by them, but at the same time, I'm so repelled by Denver as well because the quarterback question is so huge because they have this collection of awesome skill talent. I mean, we got Courtland Sutton coming back. Jerry Jeudy had some really promising signs last year, obviously had some warts to his game that we'll get into as well. Noah Fant seems to be blossoming. Albert O, once he's healthy, is an interesting piece. KJ Hamler, of course, and then we don't really know what to do with Tim Patrick yet because he just replaced all of those Courtland Sutton snaps a year ago. So just kind of starting things out, and then also the idea that maybe it's not going to be Drew Lock at quarterback come week one. Obviously, the free agency has mostly passed as far as the quarterbacks are concerned, but maybe Denver is an option to either trade up or take a quarterback at number 9. We'll have to see what happens there, but I think that it stands to reason that Drew Lock isn't the unquestioned starter in Denver. So I just kind of want to start things off with your level of interest in this offense and how it changes, whether it is Drew Lock back there or if it's a rookie starting at quarterback for them, and how this offense might function.
Yeah, it's a good situation, like you said, for the pass-catching personnel. It's hard to tell how much the quarterback and even the blocking can kind of put that receiving talent into the box score, if it's just kind of going to go to waste or otherwise sort of give a disappointing return. So it's tough for me to guess which way that's headed because Drew Lock is one of the more confusing quarterbacks to figure out for me because he's basically been bad. I don't think there's anything to get around the fact that he's been just bad to this point. It's just that it wouldn't be the first time if he does well from this point, even after doing poorly to begin with, and especially because he has a lot tools-wise to work with, especially the throwing velocity, the throwing distance, and even as a runner, like he's got quite a bit of athleticism actually. So for fantasy, that's no small detail. Like if he takes a step forward this year because he's a runner, that doesn't mean any less to fantasy investors in him. It would mean less to the pass catchers, but I also kind of look at it like if Locke gets going as a runner, it probably will open things up as a passer. So any gains that he can make can kind of not like beget gains other places, but kind of like help bring them about, especially when the defense has to stress itself so much over the pass catchers. And that's something that's going to be on the mind of the secondary every single play. It's like one thing to go against Drew Lock knowing like, oh, he's got Jeudy, he's got Tim Patrick. That's it. We just got to, tee up on him and rattle him and just gun for him. You can't just gun for him like crazy if every snap there's all of Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Fant, and Tim Patrick, who did well last year. Tim Patrick's probably going to regress a little bit just because he's probably more like a big guy if he is a capable starter. But he's been, right at or above the baseline pretty much, I think, the past 2 years at least there. So it's hard to really make a case against him. And when you got speed, like I guess you wouldn't say speed with Jeudy, but there's a lot of elusiveness there you have to account for. There's certainly speed with Fant. There's certainly speed with Okwuegbunam and KJ Hamler. So that's just a lot of things you have to remember every play as a defense. And when you're spending time thinking about those things, you're spending a little less looking at Drew Lock's eyes and trying to figure out where he's going, or you can look too much at Lock and he can send one to Hamler over your head, and that kind of just fixes itself from that point. So there's a wide range of ways that Drew Lock specifically can go, and the way Lock goes will pretty much determine the way everything else goes. But that's also, even Lock itself is enough of a question, of course, but we don't know he's going to be the guy, like you said. Like they could move up for Fields or Lance or something like that. Apparently, they already tried to trade for Sam Darnold, so that certainly indicates that if Lock is safe at this point with the Broncos missing out in that trade, he still probably has a pretty short leash, and they're going to keep looking for ways to do better than him. So we'll see. I'm not buying Lock. Like I just feel like I got to go other ways at quarterback, and for that reason, I'm not going to be picking him. But it's not because I feel certain about what way it's going to go with him. I feel quite the opposite. Like if he does well, I can't feel surprised, but I'm not going to like beat myself up for not investing because there's just so much that can go wrong at this point too.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I think the short leash detail is probably the right one to focus on when it comes to him. It wouldn't surprise me even if they don't take a quarterback at pick number 9, maybe they grab a more developmental guy to push him, maybe like a Kellen Mond or something in the second or third round. We'll have to see what happens there. But either way, I think the job security is not great for him. But again, the weapons can really help elevate him. And like you said, there are some tools when it comes to Lock. But when you're trying to like kind of solve the puzzle of what to bring from the 2020 Denver offense into 2021, you have a guy in Cortland Sutton who was such a target monster back in 2019, but he basically missed the entire season. So, I mean, it in one sense, it's easy to just point to Tim Patrick as the guy who's obviously going to have his snaps maybe reduced or his targets, whatever way you want to put it. But, maybe Jerry Jeudy, maybe his role gets a little bit different. I don't know how much it drops off. He had like over a 20% target share a year ago. Noah Fant, 17% target share. Tim Patrick, 17% in the games that he played. Did miss a little bit of time. I think he just missed one game, but that knocked down his total target share. But on average, about 17, 18% for Tim Patrick. So again, a lot of mouths to feed, and who kind of gets penalized by Sutton's injection into this offense, because you figure if healthy, he's an 800 snap guy.
Yeah, I think Sutton will play like 900 snaps, maybe more than that. And if only because of the category of player he is and where he lines up, I think it has to be Patrick that he hurts the most. It could hurt Jeudy. It probably will hurt Jeudy in terms of the target volume, but I think Sutton being there will make Judy's job so much easier that there might be an efficiency boost to offset at least, and maybe even create like a surplus relative to last year's sort of baseline for Jeudy. So with Sutton out there, the safeties can't sit on Jeudy the way they used to. They just can't do it. So that's going to open up things for Jeudy to offset. I don't see the offset potential with Patrick. Like I feel like more likely he was kind of not to like take credit away from the guy, because he did what he did last year with probably most of the defensive attention on him, or at least not much less than what was on Jeudy, and he did it anyway. So he can clearly, at the very least, like beat a defense if they're not keeping honest and giving him a fair amount of attention. But I think he was nonetheless kind of toward his higher range of outcomes the past couple of years, and I think he was kind of due to settle down toward the middle as it was, and bringing Sutton in, I think, pretty much just makes it a certainty.
Okay. And then, looking at the way that the routes and the alignment were distributed a year ago, Jeudy was mostly outside, but did play over 300 snaps in the slot. Tim Patrick just a little bit more snaps out of the slot, 329 to Jeudy's 325. KJ Hamler played 358, so that's, a significant number of slot snaps. When you have the tight end personnel that Denver also has as well, what do we?
They should go air raid, basically.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted them. I really wanted them to get Darnold, because it's like, I know everybody, and I don't really have a good argument against the idea that Sam Darnold is bad.
Yeah,
I just don't think he is, and I don't expect anyone to care. But that's how I looked at it, and I was like, man, if he just goes to Denver, he's going to have just so much size and speed on the field. They really should try to get Equegbenham on the field more, in my opinion. And I know Fant is good, but Equegbenham could be as good as him. And at the very least, he's a guy who, if the defense isn't paying attention to him deep, you get an easy touchdown out of it. Like you just, that's one that can change the way defenses approach you the rest of the year if you play that one right. So yeah, there's a lot that can go right, and it's not many. There's not enough to go around. I wanted a bigger pie, and I'm kind of skeptical Locke can do it. But at the very least, all these guys are going to flash big plays, and I think Hamler's a year away. I think Okwuegbunam doesn't have much realistic room to operate. It's going to be Sutton, it's going to be Jeudy, and then Patrick. But all of those guys, a receiver, obviously Fant ahead of Patrick, third overall in the order, I would say. But all of those guys are pretty dangerous.
So looking at Jerry Jeudy specifically, I think, it's probably fair to say that we were relatively cool on Jeudy, at least compared to market around this time a year ago. And there were some obvious flaws to his game. I mean, the catch rate was abysmal. How much of that do you want to lop onto Drew Lock? How much do you want to blame it on Jeudy? He did have some drops issues during his time at Alabama, so that carried over a little bit. I mean, 11.5% drop rate a year ago. That can't continue. I assume that's just such a bad number that it will creep back towards maybe just mid-range of being bad or a problem. I can't imagine him catching less than 50% of his targets again. I know he was a downfield guy, like almost 14 yards of average depth of target, but I think that, he's going to be someone that catches closer to league average or, high 50% at the very least, and can do a lot of damage with those targets. So I guess at ADP, with the consideration of Courtland Sutton coming back, how much do you like Jerry Jeudy at his current ADP? It looks like he, in best balls over the last week, he's going as high as 78, as low as 99. So a pretty thin range, or a pretty reliable range as to where he's going. Where are you with Jeudy specifically?
Well, he looks like he's at wide receiver 40 overall, and to me that seems a little bit, at once, like a little bit low, but not necessarily low enough that I'm going to end up buying a whole lot, if only because there's kind of just a glut of receivers in his range that they all end up in one tier. It's like 8 different names ranked in the draft order a particular way, but generally you're taking them at the same point in the draft if you're taking them, because it's as much as one has to be ranked ahead of the other and down to 8 or whatever number we're looking at. You practically speaking, you have to make the same decision at the same time in each case. So because if it was like an auction and I was just paying the rate for Jeudy, I'd say like, yeah, I'll probably end up with some of that. But because I have to more specifically choose between Jeudy and Sutton, I'm taking Sutton. And because I have to choose between Jeudy and Odell Beckham or DJ Chark, I'm taking those guys, not really even thinking about it. But if it were a scenario where it's like I take DJ Chark or I take Odell Beckham at whatever it is, and then I have the option of trading back up for Jeudy at that price, I would say like, yeah, that's a good price for Jeudy. I didn't have the option I didn't have a wallet that let me take both of them at the same time, I see what you're saying there. So yeah, I think he'll definitely get better is the thing. Like, I actually think his rookie season was promising. I didn't mean to come across as like a critic of his necessarily. I was more like, I think
people were just over their skis on him. So like,
right. I was like, I think he's good. I just don't know that I care. Like, I don't rank him ahead of like CeeDee Lamb or anything like that. And Justin Jefferson had a really clean prospect profile. And it's kind of like this year where it's like, all these guys are good. It just kind of depends where they land. That has a lot to do with how well they do, especially their rookie years. But Jeudy, despite the drops, graded to me as slightly above baseline because his 46% catch rate was bad, but it was only 10 points lower than the team baseline, and his yards per target was 1.1 yards over the team baseline. So that's like a break even at worst, even though it kind of looks bad at a glance because you have to put it in the broader context of how that offense actually constructed itself.
Sure. So yeah, I think that there is improvement coming, and only had 3 touchdowns on 113 targets. I feel like we talked about someone last week where the touchdowns didn't really match the target volume, but I could see some positive touchdown regression for Jeudy as well, because I expect that volume to be at least the same, at least into the triple digits.
I think that's the kind of thing that comes back into it runs head on into the Drew Lock factor again, because it's like there would be positive touchdown regression for Jeudy if the offense were throwing a certain number of touchdowns, but it's like we need Locke to actually do it.
Yeah.
Like if Locke throws 20 touchdown passes, then Judy's not getting more than 3. But if Locke somehow throws like 30, and it's like, oh well, yeah, Judy's looking at, I don't know, maybe like 8 or 9 then.
Oh, that is a good point.
I don't know how much I like the chances of that. Drew Lock used to be rough last year and the year before, so just a very wide range. It really reminds me a lot, the same thing that I said last year. Drew Lock in Denver reminds me of Mitch Trubisky in Chicago, specifically that year that he was a good fantasy pick because he had like the 6 touchdown game. And it turned out it was like, well, his numbers were good, especially in fantasy, but also he sucks. And the only reason the numbers were as good as they were is because he was throwing to players better than he is at quarterback, basically.
Yep. So maybe that, lightning in a bottle for 1 year, maybe for Locke. We'll have to see. But either way,
Mitch did it. It's definitely possible. Mitch could do it. He's just terrible. So
I don't know. I guess my bottom line takeaway is that I'm like very interested in Denver. And this is again acknowledging that the bottom could fall out because of the quarterback situation. But I love the combination of skill guys that they have. And I think that, you don't really have to break the bank in best ball right now, at least, to get a lot of these guys. So I don't know if I'll go the full Denver stack, but I definitely will be comfortable with getting multiple pieces of this passing attack. I don't know if I'll really attack much of its backfield whatsoever.
Gordon sucks. He's pretty useful because they got to give him the ball, but man, he's not good. And if they draft a halfway decent running back, I bet that guy can do just as good as him.
I was thinking about this morning as well. What if they went with like Michael Carter in the 3rd round as like a supercharged version of Phillip Lindsay?
I guess that'd be kind of weird to me, if only for the aesthetic being so similar. But I guess Lindsey was doing so poorly as a pass catcher, and Carter does project to do better there. But I don't know. He's just like as small as Lindsey, but slower pretty much, and definitely almost like he's almost definitely a better pass catching guy. But Lindsey was a really good pass catcher at Colorado. I don't know what went so badly for him in the NFL in that capacity. I wouldn't get too scared for Gordon if it was Michael Carter, I guess, specifically. But if they draft Michael Carter, I think him and Royce Freeman combined are enough to be a nuisance, because I know Royce Freeman probably isn't good, but I also just wouldn't be surprised if he has a good year eventually. It's like that guy started as a true freshman at Oregon and is a totally decent athlete. So Gordon's just not very good, or at least like he hasn't been good. He's been both injury prone and not that great on the field. I know his rushing numbers looked good last year, but that was largely propelled by that. He broke a couple big runs in some meaningless late season game that I can't remember.
Didn't he go off against the Jets or something on that Thursday night game?
Yeah, it was like some game where the team that they were playing, it was
Jeff
an ugly
Smith game.
Yeah, it was an ugly game, and the defense, whatever it was, just kind of like disgraced its and injuries and just ineffectiveness. And I'm leery of investing in him, even though the projected playing time is definitely tempting.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, like Melvin Gordon was like a late 3rd rounder last year. You don't have to pay anything close to that this time around as far as draft capital is concerned. But you have to decide between him and guys like Kareem Hunt, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne. If Harris or Etienne land up in what I view to be more favorable landing spots, then I'll my rookie brain will just take over, and I'm just going to take those guys.
I'm bashing Gordon, but in these 8 drafts, these 8 most recent 12-team best ball 10s, he's going 47th, and even I am not particularly concerned at that point.
Okay, yeah. So with the cost baked in there, something to consider. It's not a sexy pick
for sure.
Yeah, there you go. Let's go to the next team that we're kind of previewing that's really caught our interest. That's the Carolina Panthers. So that's a team that it's going to look a lot different similar to Denver in that it kind of lost the engine of its offense early in the season, Christian McCaffrey basically just I barely consider his season last year's season. So that obviously changed a lot of things, and another kind of interesting detail to try to sort through, in addition to the quarterback change, which we'll get to in a second. But, that was a new offense. So were there any breadcrumbs that you could take away from the games that McCaffrey did play, or even the games that he didn't, with the way that they used Mike Davis, to where you expect Carolina's offense to function a very specific way as far as its running back involvement is concerned, especially when they have, a new quarterback now, and they don't have Curtis Samuel, but DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson are, obvious great talents that they need to, be kind of steering the offense toward.
Yeah, I think it'll look pretty much the same, with the exception of, and not necessarily an exception, but just like there's more to be settled with their slot situation specifically. I know they signed David Moore. I actually think he might be pretty good, but it's hard to tell whether they do or whether they just kind of signed him to sort of, just get some depth there and give them a little bit more of an error margin in the draft. So that's possible. They signed Dan Arnold too, which is interesting because he's not a real tight end. Like, I've seen some analysis that's pitting him against Ian Thomas, and Ian Thomas might be headed to the bench, but that doesn't have anything to do with Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold does not play the same position as him. He's not going to line up in line more than maybe, I don't know, like a quarter of the time. And when he does, it's going to be a lot of like motioning into position so that he can do kind of like a zone blocking assignment on the edge and probably next to a tight end who's got the innermost in line. So Arnold, if he's there and if he's on the team, isn't playing tight end. So I would have to guess that if he's playing at all, he's mostly playing slot receiver. He could be playing just outside receiver, I guess. I mean, he's 6'6", 220. He's not really playing tight end. So he could line up outside, which I guess could be interesting. But I think they signed him to play slot receiver basically. And so David Moore could be like competing for slot snaps and outside snaps, being like a swing backup type. Dan Arnold and David Moore could be just splitting the slot. But then, of course, they could also draft a guy like Kadarius Toney in the top of the second round and just plug him into Samuel's role, just exactly the same, more or less. That's all on the table, and I can't really tell right now which way it breaks. They might not know either. They might be waiting to see what happens with the draft. So there's a lot to figure out there, but Moore or Arnold could be interesting. Like Arnold, I was just writing something that I'm hoping to post later today. Arnold's like the only tight end in best ball 10s that I think is worth drafting in the final 2 or 3 rounds, which is more so to say, get your tight ends before the last 3 rounds. Don't go like I'll just take Dan Arnold in the 18th plan. Like you don't really want to end up there. It's more like if you do, here's kind of all you have as recourse now. But Arnold could be pretty interesting because, at tight end, we have a much lower bar for what's useful production. So if he has 400 yards this year, we wouldn't care if he was a receiver, obviously, but if he's a tight end and if it's in best ball, there's a chance that those 400 yards have 3 or 4 useful games in there somewhere. So if he's playing receiver rather than tight end, and if he's getting graded against tight ends rather than receivers, Dan Arnold could be pretty useful depending on what happens with the draft there. Otherwise, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are locked in.
Yeah, of course. They are. And, with the change at quarterback, does your outlook on both of them mostly stay the same, or are you willing to kind of maybe pay 5 or 6 picks above market for the like a half a round for a guy like Moore or Anderson?
Anderson's tempting. Moore is tempting. I think they're both good players. I think Darnold is, maybe he won't be good, but I think he's better than some other quarterbacks who have put up useful numbers. And I think he's certainly going to be an improvement over Bridgewater. I think Bridgewater was awful last year, and I think that it bodes well. I don't know if it's more Joe Brady or Matt Rule or both, but it bodes well just from like the team structure standpoint, like the wisdom of the people calling the plays and everything, that they were able to get above baseline returns for all 3 of those receivers. So those 3 receivers, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, all had pretty much the best years that they could with the offense designed the way it was. And that happened even though Bridgewater was the quarterback and PJ Walker for a couple games. So normally when you have quarterback play as bad as those 2, the receivers cannot thrive. And yet all 3 of them did. So it's one of those things, like even if Darnold isn't good, it doesn't mean anything. Like the quarterback play can't get worse there, but I think it's pretty easy to see how it could get better, if only because like the best wide receiver crew Darnold ever threw to with the Jets, and even when he did, this is with a trash offensive line, and of course one of the worst coaches in the league's history running the show. It was like Robbie Anderson was his only decent receiver. I guess I had Crowder there too, but going from a Robbie Anderson bad offensive line offense to one where it's just a slightly below average offensive line, but with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey, it's like Darnold might suck, but Teddy Bridgewater already showed that it's hard to have truly bad numbers in this offense.
That's a huge point. That's a huge sticking point there when it comes to, where we can realistically see that this offense's trajectory going from here. And, let's talk about Sam Darnold just a little bit more because, he's someone that I know you and I were both big fans of coming out, everything like that. I mean, there's a lot of talent there, obviously a lot of turnovers, but, I was personally willing to kind of overlook that because he was he was a gamer. I thought that, he had the requisite arm strength to make all the throws. He seemed like he had it. He didn't have one obvious trait that was really stand out among the rest, but it felt like you wanted to go to war with Sam Darnold, and it obviously hasn't gone the way that it should have or was expected, at least to this point. You need to contextualize that he's still extremely young, even though he's had three, and you can't discount the scarring of 3 years in New York what may have done to him. I mean, that we've seen quarterbacks get kind of put through the ringer and get, kind of permanently damaged one way or the other just by being in really bad situations. But, how much can you put on Sam Darnold, his numbers from a year ago where he was really, really bad? I mean, the team that the Jets were dead last in yards per attempt. How much do you put that on Darnold versus just the Gase / active tanking / awful receiving core and, rookie offensive line, left tackle type of thing, all of that kind of factoring in around him. So where do you side with that whole conundrum from 2020 in terms of how to solve or figure out and what to extrapolate from Darnold last year?
Well, the whole situation with the Jets just makes Darnold's sample a non-applicable to me. It's a botched sample. It could have meant something, but there's just noise and terror there. I don't see what there is to extract other than just noting the observation of that it was discord. It was just a structure collapsing. There wasn't what it collapsed upon is not something that's that interesting to me. It was going to happen regardless of Darnold being there. I know some people were pointing at Joe Flacco playing last year, and it's oh, well, Flacco was better. Flacco was better numbers in a couple games, and he's a longtime veteran who wouldn't have had sort of the anxieties and pressures that Sam Darnold would have. Darnold, when he's out there, feels the need to be the franchise quarterback of this team. Flacco was I just gotta, sneak out of here and I
can get another contract.
Yeah, he's I just gotta not look bad. And Darnold didn't care about looking bad. He tried to make the big plays, which I don't know. I'm sure Flacco was looking for a big play. I'm not saying he literally was just trying to just throw checkdowns or whatever, but it was just not meaningful what occurred there. You could note it anecdotally for what it was, but it didn't mean anything. And for Darnold to have such objectively bad players around him and a truly destructively foolish man in Adam Gase running the whole show, Darnold could be bad, but if he was good, it would have been a similar result. I don't think a good quarterback can exist in those conditions. And particularly when we have a case like Jared Goff, who I know he's still bad, but I absolutely still believe without any hesitation or reservation that Sam Darnold is better than Jared Goff. I don't need to think about that. I don't need to think about Darnold being better than Goff or Bridgewater or Drew Lock, players like that. And we've seen with Goff improving from Jeff Fisher to Sean McVay, Mitch Trubisky having a fluky good season with the Bears. It's there's no reason that I see that Darnold can't have that kind of outcome. If players who let's just say I'm wrong that Darnold is better than Goff or Trubisky. Does anyone really want to say that he's much worse? Does anyone want to say that in a league where players as bad as Goff and Trubisky can have good fantasy seasons, that Darnold really can't either on by far the most functional team that he's played for? That all seems like stretches to me. And even if you go back to his USC career, it's not like a situation where he just like the anxieties people might have about Burrow or Tagovailoa, where they're just throwing to an all-star cast of receivers. Like Darnold's number one receiver in his last season at USC was Deontay Burnett. Yeah. So it's weird things happen. Sometimes players, who used to be good, maybe they get fractured by their circumstances. Maybe Darnold's that. Maybe Darnold just was bad and always will be. It just seems like an improbable set of details, if so, to me. Like, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing I want to wager on being the case.
Yeah, and again, like we were kind of spelling out earlier, this is an offense that like inherently is going to raise his baseline. Like it should just go so much more smoothly, not only because he already has that rapport with Robbie Anderson that was solid during his time in New York, but you got DJ Moore and of course, I think he probably unlocks more things for Joe Brady to call out in this offense and
downfield especially.
Yeah, so 100% there, and you do have Christian McCaffrey back this time around, and that puts pressure on the defense in a different way. So I think that just this whole set of circumstances makes it all set up really well for Carolina. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned them as another team to discuss and break down a little bit, because I think there's a lot there, and maybe it's not all being completely addressed in the best ball markets right now. I didn't get a share of Darnold this past one because I went a little more expensive at quarterback. I went with Lamar Jackson and then Trevor Lawrence. But in my other ones where I waited when like Trevor Lawrence was my first quarterback, I do have Sam Darnold, and this was pre-trade as well, but I went late Sam Darnold in a few spots and didn't think twice about it. And I was even thinking or really having no idea where he was going to end up. And certainly I didn't think that Carolina was like at the top of that list.
Yeah, I did not make note of where Darnold was going before, but at the very least, everyone should be able to agree he should go higher now than he was going when, not that we were assuming he was going to play for the Jets, but wherever you valued him with the Jets, he should be safely above that in Carolina. Like I have him in a super flex best ball draft where I, at the time, had no idea where he was playing, and I took him in like the 6th round or something as my maybe 7th or something as my quarterback 3. And I'm really happy with how that one turned out, because now I've got Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, Sam Darnold, and Cam Newton, who I got later in that one. So my running backs probably suck in that one, but I think I've got pretty easily the highest scoring quarterbacks in that one. Beautiful.
There you go. It's a good setup there. Let's go ahead. Let's transition over to our rookie draft. So this will, is supposed to mirror kind of what you, our dear listener, will be going through in the next few weeks when you do your rookie drafts in your dynasties, especially if you're running that draft before the actual NFL draft takes place. So that this one will definitely help apply to you there and hopefully give you some good ideas as to how things should shake out, how you should be valuing certain positions, that sort of thing. So Mario, I'll go ahead and give you the first pick here. Why don't you lead us off?
Yeah. So my top 50 that I posted to the site, there's no paywall, you can look at it. This contradicts my top 50, but to spice things up a bit, I'll instead of taking Jamar Chase like I always do, I'll take Kyle Pitts. And this is not meant to be a shocking take or anything. It's just kind of like playing the scenario, thinking it through. Kyle Pitts is the best tight end prospect since Tony Gonzalez, something like that. Like it's a 20-year kind of thing. It's not a 5-year. It's not a 10-year. It's a 20-year, 25-year kind of question. And the wide receiver depth is so great in this draft that before the NFL draft, there's so much that we can't control about where these talents will land, who they're going to be dependent on for production. I'm not as worried about that with Pitts, because whoever takes him is going to need to use him right away to justify the expense. And for whatever team he's on, generally speaking anyway, there's no one who can get in his way. He would have to just kind of fail, which seems unlikely to me. So I think you can get Pitts and you can call it a reach or whatever, but even if you reach for Pitts in a draft, you're still going to be in position to get good receivers. And the people who are spending earlier at receiver than you might lose their theoretical gains if their guys just go to the wrong team.
Yeah, that's a great way of framing it, and that partially informs what I'm going to do with this pick at number 2, because again, like you said, receiver is so ridiculously deep, and tight end, like you said, is perilously thin. I mean, it's Kyle Pitts and then a giant gulf between him and whoever that second tier. I don't think there's really any other rookie tight end that will be worth drafting for season long. For dynasty, it's a different question, but you'll have to go much later for them to be really of interest. But like a Hunter Long, that
Pat Freiermuth and Brevin Jordan, maybe Tommy Tremble, but that guy seems like a fullback or something.
I had Tremble to the Steelers in the second round in a mock I did a week ago that was like a full field mock draft, but like that made, because it made football sense for the Steelers more than like something to really catch your eye for fantasy. But back to my pick here, I've really done a number on this preamble. But basically, running back really thin. I kind of acknowledge that the market seems to suggest that Najee Harris might be the first running back off the board, but I still think that Travis Etienne, provided that he gets picked in the first 35 picks, which I'm very confident that he will, he's still going to push for a really heavy workload that's right in line with Najee Harris, and I think he's better than Najee Harris. So with all that in mind, give me Travis Etienne second overall in this rookie draft.
Yeah, Etienne is the top running back. I've talked about it a lot, obviously. It's tedious, it's annoying. I wish people would start to just be more lucid and stop trafficking in narratives and trying to be in line with everybody else on the internet about everything. Just return to the tape and the stats, and you don't need to open your third eye for this one. Etienne is the best running back in this draft. It's not actually close at all. But yeah, so that's a good pick. I'll go to Jamar Chase now. He is one of those guys who is very much, it's likely that he's going to go to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati would probably be fine, might even be his best case. You could say, like, maybe it's best that he's with Burrow. I don't know. But he could still go to a worse place yet. So I would not blame anyone for taking him like third or fourth or something like that. And all the same, if you do get him third, you're getting him lower than the general going rate. So it's one of those guys. This top four picks, there's top three picks. There's a lot of ways you can go. They're all justifiable and all of distinct upsides with not that much in the way of downside.
Exactly. So next up, I'll go with Trevor Lawrence. I just think that he, similar to how generational of a talent Kyle Pitts is at tight end, Trevor Lawrence right there among quarterbacks. I've always loved your example of, like, you can't apply the Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck comp. It's more of a LeBron James, Ronald Acuna type of guy. So I like Trevor Lawrence. I think that he goes to an offense. I know how bad the Jags were these last few years, but there's talent there. I think the offensive line maybe isn't as bad as people think. Maybe the injection of the new system with Urban Meyer really fits with Trevor Lawrence's skill. So Trevor Lawrence, for me, I mean, this doesn't surprise you or myself, but, he's someone that you should definitely be targeting in your regular season-long drafts. And I think that he will already be a top 10 fantasy quarterback from the second he steps on the field this year. So give me Trevor Lawrence at 4.
Yeah, I know people think that that's a reach, but people got to think back to kind of like the Kyler Murray draft. It's like, imagine all the people who were taking N'Keal Harry over Kyler Murray under the assumption, the truism, like, you can't take a quarterback in a one quarterback league. It's like, well, what if the quarterback's really good? Still, don't do it. The receivers are better currency. It's like, receivers bust pretty often too, and we're not talking about a normal prospect with Lawrence. It's just different. So if he's like a Mahomes level asset, then no one is going to complain about how they spent a top 5 pick on him in a one quarterback dynasty league. So with that all said, we may be biased, but I'm going to go ahead and say good pick, John. With this 5th overall pick, I'm like loath to make it because I don't think Najee Harris is actually that good. I think he's good. I think he's just good though, and I think Etienne is clearly a great running back prospect, and that people can't distinguish the two on that basis irritates me. So with the 5th pick, I'll take Najee Harris with also the announcement open for trades. If anyone would like to trade, their later picks to get the rights to Harris, just call me. It might not take that much. I would love to trade the rights to Harris for like, I don't know, just like Devontae Smith and Kadarius Toney or something like that. If there was two pretty good receivers in the first 3 rounds that I could get in exchange for Harris, I would make that deal. But for now, I'm taking him 5th and holding him hostage.
Okay, smart. I like that play, and yeah, the capitalizing on where he should be selected, because it realistically, even if we're not as high on him as some others, he should still probably go 5th or 6th, maybe even slightly higher in your rookie draft. So if you're not that high on him personally, maybe someone else in your league that wasn't picking there could be, and there you have the makings of a trade. So I like that call. Next up, pick number 6, I think it's Jalen Waddle. Dipping into the receiver pool a little bit. I think that he goes somewhere between pick 11 to the Giants to maybe 15 or 16. Don't think he falls much further than that. Everything sounds like it's good to go as far as how the NFL views his recovery from that ankle injury. Obviously played in the national championship game a little bit, so I'm not concerned about that. Dude's a total game breaker. I'd be very, very happy to have him as the second receiver off the board and in the 6th overall player in a rookie draft.
I think he's a good bet to go 6th overall to the Dolphins. And yeah, I think that Waddle is clearly the truth. I have no reservations about that guy at all. He's different. He's going to be a monster in my opinion. Maybe like Carolina Steve Smith or something like that. With the 7th pick, this is where we get into this range of like a big tier of really good receivers. And the best ones are just going to be the ones that, at least in 2021 and the short term, the best ones are just going to be the ones who land with the best quarterbacks and the most like snaps available. So
Justin
the talent,
Jefferson,
the talent question is not really worth thinking about that much. You almost want to just like kind of flip a coin more or less for me between Marshall, Bateman, Moore, Devontae Smith. I'm going to take Terrace Marshall here though. He's just a little cleaner right now to me than Devontae Smith, with Devontae Smith apparently just not running or doing any testing before the draft. It's like I'm defensive, I guess, about that guy being written off over his frame, but if we don't know what he runs, then I just know less about him for certain than I do about guys like Terrace Marshall, Rashad Bateman, and Elijah Moore. So I'll go with Marshall, and I'm going to just kind of be anxious about his landing spot until the draft, I guess.
Okay, I like the Terrace Marshall call. In that mock that I was doing a week ago, I mocked Marshall, I believe, to the Titans at 22. I thought that would have been kind of an interesting potential landing spot. They got to replace Corey Davis somehow, and you can only give Derrick Henry so many carries. You can only give A.J. Brown so many targets. So maybe
disagree on that last part. Just throw it to him every play. It'll work, I think. It's fine.
Fair enough. Let's move on. So next pick, I'm a little scared on Devontae Smith too, and we know what the measurables are for Elijah Moore. I'll go with Elijah Moore at 8. I think it's become more and more obvious that he's going to go in the late first round. I don't think he falls past very, very early second. And so the draft capital element's taken care of. His ability to fit into a system as a slot receiver right away off the bat is a slam dunk in my opinion. So he's a day one contributor. If he goes to the right landing spot, if he goes to like the Saints or something, it'd be electric. Like just right off the bat, I would absolutely love that. So give me Elijah Moore at 8.
Yeah, I'm not sure I believe the 4.35 40 on him, but just as important about Elijah Moore, he actually measured in at 5'10". Like he's going to be listed at 5'10", 180, which kind of, I think, makes him what the Deontay Johnson truthers wanted Deontay Johnson to be. Like Moore can be that kind of guy, but he's got more tools to work with, and that tools distinction is what the gap is between good and serviceable versus like standout, very good. And I think Moore's production in college makes clear that he's with the tools not really a question either. Like he really can't fail. Or at least it would be shocking if he did. 9, I'm going to take Rashad Bateman. I don't know if it'll age well. Like Devontae Smith is more or less the same grade to me, even with the non-applicable for his athleticism. But when we're advising people how to handle their wagering interests, it's like And if Devontae Smith does suck, and in hindsight, I advise people to take the athletic unknown on the skinniest frame over guys who were not similarly productive in college, but productive enough and with very good workouts otherwise. That's one of those things that in hindsight you wouldn't have a good excuse for, like if it goes bad, I'll just look like an idiot for it. So I'll take Bateman because there are just quite simply fewer questions with him.
Okay, no, that's a really good way of framing that, and that we'll see if that catches on or if people are become hip to it one way or the other. But I think like you said, there are less concerns. There's more precedent for guys like Bateman having success than Devontae Smith with all those unknowns.
And quickly, Devontae Smith is different from Waddle because we just know Waddle's fast as hell, and he incidentally is 10 pounds heavier too.
Yep. And denser too, because he's not quite as tall. I will go with Devontae Smith here. I think this is probably his basement floor at the 10th pick in your rookie drafts. We laid out that what could go wrong, what could go right. Maybe he lands in a good landing spot. He maybe becomes. I thought the one comp that could make sense on the positive end of things, maybe like a Marvin Harrison type. I mean that would be amazing. Obviously, Heisman Trophy level production, but again, those concerns made him drop here. But at 10, looking at those other receivers and other guys available, Smith felt like the right call at 10. So if your draft plays out this way, Smith at 10 is a value, I think.
I still like Smith, definitely. I'm not trying to sound like a critic, but yeah, and for what it's worth, if he does end up running before the draft and he runs like a 4.45 or better, then I would move him back ahead of Terrace Marshall, and yeah, I would put him up. I would lock him into, I think, the right behind Jalen Waddle in the rankings if Devontae runs a 4.45. But in the meantime, I still think he's going to be good. It just feels more reckless to advise other people. So if it's me or you on the board, I think we're taking him a little earlier than this, John. But yeah, I think around the clock rather. At 11 overall, I'm going to go to the quarterback supply because I think we jump off a wide receiver tier. And Justin Fields, I don't really believe I'm not one of his super fans, but I think the some of the narratives that are getting pushed in the media lately seem borderline desperate. And I don't think that some of the things that he's getting raked for in the media are things that scouts will say about every quarterback, and yet just this time is why it's for some reason becoming mainstream news. And I think that indicates a motive rather than like a sincere concern. So I basically think this Mac Jones stuff at 3 is nonsense. I think that Fields is going to go to Atlanta at the latest, and San Francisco more likely than Mac Jones to San Francisco. So I'm going to take Justin Fields here because a guy who's an athlete like him is going to be useful in fantasy as long as he's in a vaguely functional offense. So ideally that would be Shanahan, I think. But if it's not Shanahan, Arthur Smith will work fine. Not so much for this year, but if he goes to Atlanta, then Justin Fields should be like pushing for that Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott range of quarterbacks if he's a starter.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, and like you said, there is a definite like tier shift after Devontae Smith, the way that we've had this laid out. So jumping Fields, going to him as a second quarterback definitely makes a lot of sense late in the first round of a rookie draft. I will probably stick with receiver here. I'm looking at two very, very different guys. I like the profile more for Nico Collins, so I'll go with that. That might be acknowledging that he will probably go later in the actual draft than Rondale Moore, but I feel more certain that the stuff that Collins brings to the table will stick at the NFL level, whereas Moore, there's with Rondale Moore, there are more concerns in my opinion. So I will take Nico Collins to round out the first round, and we'll just kind of run through here on the second round a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I'll take for the first pick in the second round Trey Lance. It's basically the same reasoning as Fields, just that Lance might be a little more likely for a red shirt as a rookie. But the peak upside with him is basically peak Josh Allen or better. Like he should be he should be a guy who can take rushing volume and explosiveness as a passer too.
Like that. I will go with Kadarius Toney with the second pick of the second round. I feel like he's going to be a top 40 selection, and again, he's got a little bit more projectable stuff than Rondale Moore. I love Rondale Moore. I feel like I've painted myself into the corner of being like a Rondale hater, but I think that there's just so much
reasonable concerns.
Yeah, there's just some concerns, man. I'm sorry. So give me Toney, especially if he goes somewhere like the Jags at the top of the second. Oof, would really like that.
Yeah, that'd be good. I think he's going either there or the 49ers or the Carolina Panthers, and all of them I think sound good.
Yes.
So, but yeah, for 15th pick, this is going to be the team that took Jamar Chase in the first round. So with wide receiver already shored up, I'm going to go with Javonte Williams. And this is much later than Javonte Williams goes in most people's drafts. And I don't know what to tell them. It's like, if you want to freak out about a guy who's smaller and slower than Kylan Hill and didn't take up as much of a workload in college, and if you want to say there's 3 rounds between them, you can do that. But I'm laughing at the idea. And whereas I'm like trying to play it safe with the Devontae Smith advisement, it's like I can't tell someone to take a 212-pound 4.58 running back in the top 5 and like over ETN or Najee Harris. It's just ridiculous. So with that said, though, at 15, it's an easy one because I still like Javonte Williams as a day 2 prospect, and with running back a bigger need, I'll take him here.
There you go. Next up, with the 5th pick of the second round. 4th, I will go with Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State. I don't think that he's the flashiest guy in the world and has some injury history, but that dude can just play receiver. And I'm starting to become more and more convinced that you don't need to be like that superior athlete to be a productive receiver in the NFL. Like if you have some moxie to you, if you have just the route running and the general know-how, I think that could get you a long way. And I think Wallace has all of that. So I will go with Wallace there. Mario, I think you have muted yourself. You're good.
I did mute myself. I thought I unmuted myself.
I'm sorry, my take was so objectionable. No,
I was saying Tylan Wallace reminds me a lot of Robert Woods. I think he's going to be a really good player if his health cooperates. So I definitely like that pick. With this one, I'll take Rondale. I think he's going to be limited for like the volume he can take on and like maybe the depth of target, but he's easy to use, even though he's also atypical, So I think he'll be at least a steady contributor, and he could have a few big carries, a few big catches that give him some big games too, even if he's like a low depth of target guy.
Yep. Really no downfield skill set that we know of from Purdue, but explosive with the ball in his hands, if nothing else. Next up, I will go with Diami Brown out of North Carolina. I'm fairly confident that he ends up being a day 2 selection. Where on day 2, I think it maybe leans a little bit closer to the 3rd round, but I could definitely see him in the 2nd later on. And he's 20 yards per catch type of guy over a large sample at North Carolina. A lot to like about his game as well. So I'll go with Diami Brown.
Nice. I'm going to go with Tamorrion Terry at this pick. I feel like the hype on him is just a little too quiet for a guy who, to me, is basically the same prospect as Denzel Mims from last year. Like, I know his testing wasn't quite as good, but I actually like Terry's production a little bit better from Florida State. And what's interesting to me is he's like a real high top speed guy. Maybe he can't be a wide receiver 1 because he's not sudden enough off the line. But if you don't put a safety over that guy, he will kill your defense. And I think that there's not that many players you can say that about, even if he's uneven. So I'm chasing the upside here, but I'll go with Tamorrion Terry.
I like that pick a lot. Let's see here. Next up, I will go with Amari Rodgers. I think that he's someone who has an interesting skill set. I think that he's got that running back build that plays wide receiver, so that can be a problem for teams that put a small nickel back on him. He can break those tackles. So I think he has that pro-ready skill set, having played at Clemson for 4 years, obviously has the ACL in his past, but proved that he can still play at a very high level even past that. So I like Amari Rodgers there at 20.
Yeah, Rodgers is almost amazing just for how quickly he came back from that injury too. It's like no one, even Adrian Peterson, I feel like had more time than that.
Yeah, it was like 6 months, less than 6 months. It was crazy.
Totally negligent actually for Clemson to let him play that soon after the injury.
They already had T. Higgins and Justin Ross too. Like they didn't need to rush him back.
Yeah, what would they have done without him? But yeah, with this pick, I'm not a fan of the prospect, but we have to acknowledge capital currency, draft capital currency, and playing time currency. So I'm going to take Zach Wilson. He could be good, and if he is good, in fantasy, it could be quite good because he should be a bit of a runner. But I'm also skeptical that he will run very much at 6'2", 214. That's normally a frame the NFL just refuses to consider you in the top 10. And I think that watching him play is like watching someone play 500, or it's like watching Ryan Tannehill, but only off of play action in Tennessee. It's just every single play is so comfortable for him, and he just throws it up to guys who are 6'6". So I don't believe in
27 years old.
Yeah, they're all 26. Everybody on the team is Chris Winkie or that Baylor
Brandon
Danny
Weeden.
Watkins. So yeah, it's just it's fine. He's going to play. Bad quarterbacks have put up numbers. So Wilson's a better prospect than like Mitch Trubisky or something. The idea that he's anywhere near Lawrence or Fields or Lance is disgusting to me. But this is late. I shouldn't quibble over such things.
Yeah, 21 Wilson definitely makes sense. This one, maybe a little bit of wish casting here, but I'll go Kylan Hill at 22. I think that he's the next or the best running back up on the board. Maybe. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way that you have your top 50 rank, maybe an acknowledgement that maybe Kylan Hill goes a little bit later than some of these other running backs that are currently available. But I'll bet on talent here and hopefully a good landing spot. So Kylan Hill at 22.
Yeah, and as much as he's projected to go later than guys like Kenneth Gainwell and Michael Carter, those guys don't have 3-down upside like Kylan Hill does either. So they got to make it work on passing downs, but Hill can make it work on passing downs, but could make it work in an additional way that they can't. So especially when you're chasing the upside, Kylan Hill can play. He's just got politics against him. Like Mike Leach is just whining about him to everybody. And I guess we'll see how much everyone cares about Mike Leach's opinion soon enough. But Kylan Hill is good. He's like Marion Barber or something like that to me. He's just fury on the field. So with this next pick here, I didn't want to sound like I was bashing Kenneth Gainwell or Michael Carter, and indeed, I still like Kenneth Gainwell, so I'm going to take him here. He's going to have to make it work as like a Gio Bernard type probably, but I think that he's got enough talent, and he ran like a 4.47 sort of thing, 4.45, kind of 40. So even though Kenny Gainwell was 5'8", 200, which was smaller than expected, the skill set is there, and I think the speed is enough to work at the NFL level.
Yep, love Kenny Gainwell. I've kind of gone back and forth on my evaluation of him during this offseason, but I definitely think that he deserves to be in the top 2 rounds of a rookie draft. And I'll round it out. This is putting my stamp that the Mac Jones is not someone that you should be targeting with a pick of any sort of real value or currency. I'll go with Anthony Schwartz. The speed is just different. Probably the fastest guy in the class. Maybe the fastest, like almost as fast as Henry Ruggs.
He's faster, probably, and he's so young. Like I don't understand why people aren't noticing more that he's not even going to be 21 until October. So even if you think he sucks as a receiver to this point, like he's so raw and he's so recently a track devoted guy. It's like, well, think it through. He's catching up on lost time, and if he does make progress, it's going to be like exponential compared to the way most guys make progress.
Yeah, and he was able to command basically as many targets as Seth Williams this past year, who's a career receiver and has been since high school. So for him to catch up the way that he did, it does portend some serious development in the positive way for Schwartz. So get the tool or get things a little bit more refined, a little more polished. On top of that, speed. You don't even have to be that much more refined. Just get him the ball in some space, and you're good to go.
Rich man's Russell Gage, I would call him, and I think that could be a very good player, even though I'm low on Gage.
I'll take it. Mario, fire off your next couple of guys that were in your consideration, and then we're going to sign off here.
Yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy that I would like if we could get his snaps guaranteed, but he's going to have to make it as a slot person for the most part, and there's just a lot of slot receivers right now hanging around the league. So if he gets the snaps, I love him. I just don't know if they're going to be there. And it's the same thing with Jalen Darden at North Texas. I think he's clearly very good, and if he gets snaps, I'm buying in. I'm taking out a loan to buy in on it. But in the meantime, we don't know whether he's going to fall. I will say with Darden, this is no Penny Hart case. Like Penny Hart ran like a 4.65 or something like that. He was productive in college, but he's not fast like Darden. He's not quick like Darden. So Darden's going to be different than some of these other small school slot receivers that we've seen fail. Otherwise, I really like Amir Smith-Marset from Iowa. Like he ran a little slower than I expected. Like he's like a 4.47 or something like that. I was hoping for a low 4.4 or 4.37, something like that. He's skinny, but the production's very clean at Iowa, and he actually has a lot in common aesthetically with Devontae Smith, I think. Like he's a little too skinny basically, but he just has a way of losing people.
Absolutely. So those are good. Those are good like next 3 up guys to consider, and maybe you'll be able to get them in the mid third or later on in your rookie draft, but definitely put a little star next to those guys' names. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast. We will, of course, be back next week. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.